All right, so this video is going to go through the return. This is the second section of Sundiata that we are reading closely. We have already summarized his exile, why he left home, and now we know why he's coming back. Now, before we start reading, you do need to have your hard copy of the questions. You are only responsible for answering 2 questions on the collaborative document, typing the answers, but you're still going to write the answers on here because that will help you remember what happens in the story. As we read, we need to pause and check our understanding. And also, you will be doing an essay and a project on this story, so you need to make sure that you know it. All right, before we read, I do want to show you a map. All right, so this map is available in my slideshow on the last slide. If you want to put it in your slideshow, you can just copy the slide from mine and put it at the end of yours. So this is where Sunjata's father lived, okay? And so this area was Mali, but Mali was not like a cohesive kingdom at that point. It was made up of city-states. And so this is where Sunjata's father was king. After his father's death and all the threats by his stepmother, he leaves. He tries to go to the next kingdom over, but because of the close proximity to his stepmother and they're worried about what she might do, they do not allow him to stay there. So he goes over to the next kingdom, which is where one of his good friends lives. So this is going to be important in today's reading. But he ends up moving on up here. So he moves north. Now, this area is still in what is considered Mali today, but you have to think about it's the 1200s. This is quite a big walk over difficult terrain. So he's here for a little bit, but then he settles in Mima, and he stays in Mima for about 7 years. So at the start of the return, he's in Mima, and now he's going to go back home, okay? So you could think he might just follow this path back, but when he gets to Taban, there are going to be some complications, and so there are going to be battles, and he's going to battle all around here before he can finally make it back home. And today we're going to read about this battle, and next class we'll read about this battle. So that's just a little map to help give you context for where this reading takes place. All right, so I'm going to read from the virtual text. You all have access to this on Classroom. I am on page 57. You also have a folder under your desk that has the photocopied version of the text. All right, so the return starts with our griot giving us some sort of proverbs, just kind of giving us some wisdom about Sunjata's situation. Actually, let me go back and tell you the little summary of this section. All right, so the return. When he hears that his stepmother and stepbrother abandoned his father's land to a sorcerer king, Sunjata knows he must return home. All right, so that's what the big summary of this section. All right, so now the griot is going to give us some wisdom about Sunjata's situation. Every man to his own land. If it is foretold that your destiny should be fulfilled in such and such a land, men can do nothing against it. All right, and we have to remember that Sunjata's destiny was meant to be fulfilled in Mali, specifically with his father's land. He was going to be the greatest king of Mali. So all of this area is tied into his destiny, but he has to go back to his father's land. Mansa Tunkara, and that is a name for the king of Mima, could not keep Sunjata back because the destiny of Sogolon's son was bound up with that of Mali. Neither the jealousy of a cruel stepmother, nor the wickedness, nor her wickedness, could alter for a moment the course of great destiny. So Sunjata is destined to go home. The king of Mima can't stop him by making him his heir, and his stepmother couldn't stop him by exiling him and trying to have him killed. Sunjata is going back home. Okay, that's going to happen. The griot saying, there's no question. All right, so now we're going to see how old Sundiata is, and we're going to see how he's described, and we'll take a little pause to write this down because this is question 15. The snake, man's enemy, is not long lived, yet the serpent that lives hidden will surely die old. Jata was strong enough now to face his enemies. At the age of 18, He had the stateliness of the lion and the strength of the buffalo. Now, if you're not sure what stateliness means, it kind of means like the presence um, of the lion. His voice carried authority. His eyes were live coals. His arm was iron, and he was the husband of power. All right, so we're going to pause and discuss what those metaphors mean and write them down. All right, back to reading. The next question we're looking for is, who does Sundiata take with him when he leaves Mima? Musa Tunkara, king of Mima, gave Sundiata half his army. The most valiant came forward of their own free will to follow Sundiata in the great adventure. The cavalry of Mima, which he had fashioned himself, formed his iron squadron. All right, so the first group of people he takes with him is he takes half of the army, and he has been responsible for training the army. They're already loyal to him, they're ready to go, they're his defense. Sundiata, dressed in the Muslim fashion of Mima, left the town at the head of his small but redoubtable army. The whole population sent their best wishes with him. He was surrounded by 5 messengers from Mali, and Manding Bori rode proudly at the side of his brother. All right, so I know there's a lot of characters, things have gotten confusing, but Manding Bori is going to have a big role from now on, and Manding Bori is Sundiata's half-brother, not the half-brother who was chosen to be king. That half-brother was from his father's first wife. Manding Bori is the son of his father's third wife, and she died. She's not really mentioned in the story, and so Sundiata's mother raised Manding Bori like he and Sundiata were full brothers. All right, so we are going to pause and write down who is going to Mima with Sundiata. Okay, the next thing we're looking for as we read is where does Sundiata go? Okay, we know he wants to go home, but we also know he's not going to go straight there because we looked at the map. So where is he going and why? The horsemen of Mima formed behind Jada a bristling iron squadron. The troop took the direction of Wagadu, for Jada did not have enough troops to confront Sumaro directly, and so the king of Mima advised him to go to Wagadu and take half of the men of the king, Sumaba Sisi. Let's just look real fast. Okay, so looking at the map, he's in Mima and he's going to go to Wagadu first and he's going to go there to get more troops. Okay, he's going to go somewhere else. I mean, we can look at the map. Where do we think he's going to go? He's going to stop in Taban. So that's the next place he's going. So he goes to Mima, or he goes from Mima to Wagadu and Taban before he encounters the Sorcerer King. All right. A swift messenger had been sent there, and so the king of Wagadu came out in person to meet Sundiata and his troops. He gave Sundiata half of his cavalry and blessed the weapons. Then Manding Bori said to his brother, Jada, do you think yourself able to face Sumaro now? All right, so Sumaro is the sorcerer king. Remember, Sundiata is marching back with the army because he knows he's going to have to take him on to retake his father's land. Sundiata says, no matter how small a forest may be, you can always find there sufficient fibers to tie up a man. Numbers mean nothing. It is worth that counts. With my cavalry, I shall clear myself a path to Mali. So Sundiata basically says, I might not have a huge amount of numbers, but all of these men, they are of great quality. And so I know we're going to be able to take him with the quality of this army. Sundiata gave out his orders. They would head south, skirting Sumaro's kingdom. The first objective to be reached was Taban. All right. So if we haven't answered number 17, he goes to Wagadu to get the army, and now he's going to Taban. He's going to Taban for a slightly different reason, but pretty much the same. The first objective to be reached was Taban, the iron-gated town in the midst of the mountains, for Sundiata had promised Fran Kamara that he would pass by Taban before returning to Mali. He hoped to find that his childhood companion had become king. All right, so Fran Kamara was one of Sundiata's friends as a child. He was mentioned briefly in The Lion's Awakening, and he was there when Sundiata went on the hunt and caught 10 elephants. And so he is now the king of Taban. And so Sundiata is going to stop there to get support, but also because that's his childhood friend. It was a forced march, and during the halts, the divines Singbin Marasisi and Manjan Berti related to Sundiata the history of Alexander the Great and several other heroes. But of all of them, Sundiata preferred Alexander, the king of gold and silver, who crossed the world from west to east. He wanted to outdo his prototype both in the extent of his territory and the wealth of his treasury. All right, so this is a long march. Um, I should probably look up the actual distance. It's very hard to find a lot of information about these sort of ancient towns, but they are marching from Wagadu to Taban. And as they are marching, Sundiata has people, not his griot, because his griot has been taken by the sorcerer, but he has people teaching him about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was an ancient Greek king who conquered large parts of the world, parts of Africa. He had conquered that part of Africa in the 300 BC era. So if you want to know more about him, definitely interesting to look up, but we're going to keep reading. However, Sumaro Conti, being a great sorcerer, knew that the son of Sogolon had set out and that he was coming to lay claim to Mali. The soothsayers told him to forestall this calamity by attacking Sundiata, but good fortune makes men blind. Sumaro was busy fighting Fakoli, the insurgent nephew who was holding out against him. Even before he had given battle, the name of Sundiata was already well known through the kingdom. Those of the western frontier who had seen his army marching southward spread extraordinary reports. Having just ascended the throne that year, Fran Kamara, the friend of Sundiata, had revolted in turn against Sumaro. In place of the policy of prudence followed by the old king of Taban, Fran Kamara pursued a policy of war. Proud of his troops and above all spurred on by the imminent arrival of Sundiata, Fran Kamara, now called Taban Wana, the dread one of Taban, had called to arms all the smiths and the mountain-dwelling Jajalankis. All right, so basically, the Sorcerer King knows that Sundiata is marching down. And while he's marching down, his friend is fighting off the Sorcerer King. So news is spreading as he's marching from here to there. The Sorcerer King knows what's happening. Now, this is Sundiata's father's land. This is where the Sorcerer King, this is where he is from. Okay, so they're going to march past his kingdom. They're not going to go directly to his kingdom. They're going to go here so they can get support from Taban. But then the clashes are going to start. You can see all of these spears and shields. That means battle. Okay, let's go back and see what happens. We're going to read about the first battle, and then we'll pause and we'll read about the second. Sumaro sent a detachment under his son, Sosobala, to block Sundiata's route to Taban. All right, so the Sorcerer King, he's fighting all these battles. He hears about Sundiata, but he doesn't go directly to stop him. He sends his son. Sosobala was about the same age as Sundiata. He promptly deployed his troops at the entrance to the mountains to oppose Sundiata's advance to Taban. So his son comes to try to block Sundiata around here so that he can't get to Taban. In the evening, after a long day's march, Sundiata arrived at the head of a great valley which led to Taban. The valley was quite black with men, for Soso Bala had deployed his men everywhere in the valley, and some were positioned on the heights which dominated the way through. When Jada saw the layout of Soso Bala's men, he turned to his generals laughing. "Why are you laughing, brother? You can see the road is blocked." "Yes, but no mere infantryman can halt my course towards Mali," replied Sundiata. The troops stopped. All the war chiefs were of the opinion that they should wait until the next day to give battle because they said the men were tired. "The battle will not last long," said Sundiata, "and the men will have time to rest. We must not allow Sumaro the time to attack Taban." Sundiata was immovable, so the orders were given and the war drums began to beat. On his proud horse, Sundiata turned to the right and left in front of his troops. He entrusted the rear guard, composed of a part of the Wagadu cavalry, to his younger brother Manding Bori. Having drawn his sword, Sundiata led the charge, shouting his war cry. The Sosos were surprised by this sudden attack, for they all thought the battle would be joined the next day. The lightning that flashes across the sky is slower, the thunderbolts less frightening, and floodwaters less surprising than Sundiata swooping down on Sosobala and his smiths. In a trice, Sundiata was in the middle of the Sosos like a lion in a sheepfold. The Sosos, trampled under the hooves of his fiery charger, cried out. When he turned to the right, the smiths of Sumaro fell in their tens. And when he turned to the left, his sword made heads fall as when someone shakes a tree of ripe fruit. The horsemen of Mima wrought a frightful slaughter, and their long lances pierced flesh like a knife sunk in a pawpaw. Charging ever forwards, Sundiata looked for Sosobala. He caught sight of him, and like a lion bounded towards the son of Sumaro, his sword held aloft. His arm came sweeping down, but at that moment, a Soso warrior came between Jada and Sosobala and was sliced like a calabash. All right, so Sundiata charges towards the sorcerer's son. He's about to kill him, but a soldier gets in the middle, so the soldier gets killed. Now, what would you do if you saw someone in front of you get sliced like a gourd? Sosobala did not wait and disappeared from amidst his smiths. Seeing their chief in flight, the Sosos gave way and fell into a terrible rout. All right, so essentially, the sorcerer's son is like, oh, this is not what we were expecting. I don't want to die. He runs off. His men run off too. Okay, so that is the result of the first battle. Sundiata is victorious. The other troops run away and they run back to the sorcerer king. All right, so we're going to pause for a second to make sure we can get that answered. Okay, we are going to finish this section. We're going to jump ahead a couple of pages. I'm just going to summarize a little bit, and then we're going to see Sundiata meet the Sorcerer King for the first time. All right, so the Sorcerer King's son runs off, runs back to his dad. How do we think his dad feels about it? Well, Sosobala says to his father, he is worse than a lion. Nothing can withstand him. Be quiet, you ill-starred son, Sumaro had said. What, you tremble before a lad of your own age? So the sorcerer king acts like he's not afraid and he's mad at his son for running away. All right, so now Sumaro has to come and meet Sundiata at Taban, okay, because he wasn't stopped and his son ran off. Now Sundiata has 5 armies with him. He has the half the Mima army, half the Wagadu army, and now in Taban he picks up 3 more armies because the city of Taban was heavily fortified, and so he has 5 armies with him. And he has his childhood best friend, Fran Kamara, with him. All right, so they march out, and this is where they meet on the map. Where'd my map go? So they march out. I'll show you where they meet on the map. All right, here we go. So this is where they tried to stop them, but it didn't work. All right, so this is the first big battle here. Negwaboria. I might be butchering that, and I apologize. Okay, so this is where they meet, and there's going to be the first battle between Sundiata and the Sorcerer King. Now, is this going to be the last battle? No, because we saw the map. But also, if this was the last battle, what else would happen in the story? So we know that this is not going to end the war. It's just a battle along the way. All right, so Sumaro and Sundiata are approaching each other with their armies. They each have good strategy, so it's not like a clear ambush like Sundiata was able to do with the sun. All right, so Sundiata goes into the battle like he is in the thick of it. Meanwhile, Sumaro Kanti, the sorcerer, is watching from the top of a hill. And Sundiata is wearing a white turban so you can see him, and he's looking all over for Sumaro. All right, so all of the troops come down the hills and they're encircling Sundiata, but Sundiata is able to fight his way out, and he is still searching for the sorcerer. Jada caught sight of Sosobala, the son, and bore down on him, but the latter slipped away, and the warriors of the Buffalo Woman's son raised a huzzah of triumph. So once again, the sorcerer's son just retreats. Sumaro rushed up, and his presence in the center revived the courage of the Sosos. Sundiata caught sight of him and tried to cut a passage through to him. All right, so now Sundiata sees the sorcerer's king. He's trying to get to him. He struck to the right and struck to the left and trampled underfoot. The murderous hooves of his Dafiki dug into the chests of the Sosos. Sumara was now within spear range, and Sundiata reared up his horse and hurled his weapon. All right, so Sundiata has gotten close. We know his arm is iron. He's got his spear. He's going to get the Sorcerer King. It whistled away and bounced off Sumara's chest as off a rock and fell to the ground. Okay, so that's weird. He throws a spear at him and it just bounces off his chest. All right. Sogolon's son bent his bow, but with a motion of the hand, Sumaro caught the arrow in flight and showed it to Sundiata as if to say, "Look, I am invulnerable." All right, so those are two strange things. The spear bounces off of him, he catches the arrow. We know he's a sorcerer, so what do we think he's doing? Furious, Sundiata snatched up his spear and with his head bent charged at Sumaro. But as he raised his arm to strike his enemy, he noticed that Sumaro had disappeared. Manding Bori, riding at his side, pointed to the hill and said, "Look, brother." Sundiata saw Sumaro on the hill, sitting on his black-coated horse. How could he have done it? He who was only 2 paces from Sundiata. By what power had he spirited himself away to the hill? The son of Sogolon stopped fighting to watch the king of Soso. The sun was already very low, and the Sumaro smiths gave way to Sundiata. But Sundiata did not give the order to pursue the enemy. Suddenly, Sumaro disappeared. All right, so the Sorcerer King's troops give way. So Sundiata's troops have won this battle, but he hasn't attacked the king, so the war is not over. And Sundiata thinks, how can I vanquish a man capable of disappearing and reappearing where and when he likes? How can I affect a man invulnerable to iron? So Sundiata's confused now. He's kind of at a loss. He doesn't know what he should do. He got right up to him in battle. He threw a spear, he shot an arrow, but that didn't work. And so the Battle of Neguaboria showed Jada, if he needed to be shown, that to beat the king of Soso, other weapons were necessary. All right, so the army's camp, Sundiata's army has won this battle, but he's in a bad mood because he doesn't understand how Sumara was able to escape. He says, "How was he able to escape me? Why did neither my spear nor my arrow wound him? What is the jinn that protects Sumaro? What is the mystery of his power?" So he thinks he's protected by spirits. He doesn't know where he's getting his power. He's basically walking around and thinking, but feeling a little bit defeated because he doesn't know his next move. Meanwhile, the army is eating and making camp. And this section of the story ends because they don't know what else to do. The battle of, well, that's the next battle. So then they do have another battle. But once again, it's a quick little battle, and Sundiata doesn't get the king. So still they are battling on. All right. So at this point in the story, all right, so we just had this battle. This battle is mentioned really briefly, just that like Sundiata is still marching ahead, but he doesn't kill the king. All right, and so then the next battle is going to be here, and we will read about that next class. And let's make sure we got all of our answers on our document.